Now, to help us analyze this attack and the broader conflict, let's bring in our next guest. He's an Israeli-American author and journalist, a former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, where he continues to write a popular weekly column. He writes regularly for Newsweek, and he's the author of 3 books: Shadow Strike, Inside Israel's Secret Mission to Eliminate Syrian Nuclear Power, Weapon Wizards, How Israel Became a High-Tech Military Superpower, and Israel versus Iran, The Shadow War. So no better person to join us at this time than Yaakov Katz. Yaakov, thank you very much for being with us on Stand With Us TV.
Great to be with you, Michael.
So it was a tense night for us Israelis. I hope you and your family are okay. How were they during all of this?
It was, no one slept here most of the night. And I'm sure that what happened to me and my kids was probably not that much different than probably millions of other parents around the country. I have 4 children. Both of our daughters actually served together in the IDF, your daughter and my daughter.
That's correct.
We had the opportunity to meet at different military ceremonies over the last 2 years almost. But 2 of my kids, my younger children, came to me at about 1:30 in the morning and said to me, "Abba, Dad, do you think that the Iranians are going to kill us?" And this was as the drones were making their way. And it was like, it was surreal in the sense that we were told by the IDF that this attack was happening. We were told that the drones and the cruise missiles and the ballistic missiles were making their way towards Israel. And I saw in real, I was not worried about our physical state, but imagine what this does to these children and the trauma of what all Israelis and all Israeli kids went through over the last 24 hours. And to some extent, I say, we're blessed that we live in Jerusalem. We're relatively safe. We haven't experienced what the people of the Gaza envelope have experienced over the last 20 plus years, or the people in the north have been experiencing. But we all have to agree that this is not a normal situation. And no country should have to live the way that Israel has been living over the last 6 months. And just one last word, so people, I think, fully understand this. People tend to look at the world today and they say, look, the most threatened country is Ukraine. It's attacked by Russia. And my heart goes out to the people of Ukraine. But when I think about Israel for a moment, Israel is under attack from Hamas in Gaza. Israel is under daily attack from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel is under weekly attack from the Houthis in Yemen. And last night, we had a 4th front to open up before us, before our eyes, from Iran itself. Israel is a country that is under attack and assault on 4 different fronts. We're a small country, Michael. That's pretty remarkable.
And so, you mentioned the psychological terrorism in addition to the very real terrorism and military threat that Iran exports all around the region. And this was a direct Iranian attack on Israel. So is this a new chapter in Middle East history?
Well, it's definitely not the Shadow War, which was, my book that came out back in 2012. This is a war that's right before our eyes that's playing out. This was a direct, unprecedented attack from Iranian territory against the state of Israel, a kinetic attack with hundreds of drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles. And while they were all pretty much intercepted, and I join your prayers for that young Bedouin girl who was injured from shrapnel that fell in the south. But this was a remarkable success and a testament to the amazing ingenuity and the strength of Israel's missile defense architecture, as well as the regional collective and partnership that played out early this morning with Jordanian and American and British and maybe others who were involved in helping to intercept some of these enemy projectiles as they were making their way towards Israel. But this is an all-out war. This is an act of war when you are attacked by a country that has for years, let's remember, been calling to wipe Israel off the map and is pursuing a capability that could give it that opportunity. They want to get nuclear weapons. Now, the Iranians are the greatest generator of chaos and bloodshed probably in the world, right? They're supportive proxies, and we mentioned some of them. Peter spoke about Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq, and the support of the Assad regime in Syria. What we saw last night was Iran unmasking itself, was saying, we're not just about proxies. We actually have no problem attacking Israel. And the question really now that I think Israel has to ask itself, and this is a real difficult dilemma to solve, is how do we respond to this attack? Because on the one hand, if we don't respond with force, we potentially, I fear, set ourselves up for another assault like this in a month, in 2 months, in 3 months, or maybe even half a year. It basically is similar to what happened when that first Qassam rocket was fired from Gaza. That's when we should have gone into Gaza. Now we know, and taken out all that infrastructure. It took us a long time to figure that out, and we had to wait for 1,200 plus Israelis to be massacred on a single day on October 7th for that wake-up call. We can't allow that to happen again. And that's why we have to respond, in my view, with great strength and resolve so that Iran learns a lesson that this is not acceptable and Israel will not tolerate this type of attack against its territory.
And so while Iran waits for that potential response, there was a huge rally in Tehran today to celebrate the attack. They chanted death to America, they chanted death to Israel, all while gas prices soar and their currency plummets. Is it your sense that Iran will be satisfied with what they achieved?
Look, the Iranians can say to some extent, we managed to launch the greatest assault on Israel with missiles and with drones that has ever been seen. And that's quite impressive. They didn't succeed in striking what they would have liked to. And people have argued over the last few hours that they knew that all this would be intercepted, and therefore they felt that it wouldn't cross a line that would prompt Israel to launch a large-scale aerial offensive against Iranian territory. So they gambled a bit, and maybe their gamble paid off. And there are people who are trying to say to Israel right now that what Israel did was a win, and that with the interception of 99% of all of this weaponry that was fired our way early this morning on Sunday, that the fact that it was all intercepted means we could take a win. I totally reject that definition of what happened at about 2 a.m. in Israel a win. It was a success. And Israel successfully, together with its allies, was able to intercept all of that weaponry. But defense itself is not a win. And, I tweeted this earlier, and I don't know if this is the best example, but I grew up in Chicago. Michael Jordan was, our hero as kids. Michael Jordan and the Bulls didn't win all of those championships just because of their defense. They also had to go on the offense once in a while. And Israel does need, and we saw what October 7th was for us. It came after years of containment and of a feeling of security that Iron Dome provided us. And Iron Dome is incredible, and it has saved countless lives. And this is an opportunity to say thank you to successive U.S. governments and administrations that have provided key funding and support for all of our missile defense systems. But that doesn't provide a victory. That provides a sense of security that, as we saw on October 7th, can be shattered in a second when that enemy refuses to be contained any longer and comes into your homes to rape, murder, and abduct your people.
And so the key question, what comes next? There's a danger to responding, and some would argue a greater danger, as you've mentioned, to not responding. So what are Israel's options?
The spectrum, I think, is wide, Michael, because on the one hand, we could do nothing. This is true, and this is what the world is trying to tell us to do. And we're hearing that now from the G7 and the president of the United States, Joe Biden, who I think is a friend of Israel, is saying to Israel, we're taking this to the UN Security Council, to an emergency session. There's no need. We're going to hit them with diplomacy, and you have the entire global legitimacy today. Everybody understands that Iran is behind all of this. So just sit this one out. So you could do that. But I also think that you have some military options. For example, striking the bases from which these drones and missiles were launched would be a response that I think would fall within the parameters of a proportional reaction and retaliation to what happened earlier this morning. I'm not saying that what happened needs to conclude in Israel launching a widespread strike against Iran's nuclear project and complex and facilities, as well as other infrastructure of military kind and civilian. So I'm not saying we have to go to an all-out war that would almost definitely engage also Hezbollah in the north, which is what we're probably mostly afraid of to some extent of what that would mean. But there are different options that Israel has. And I think the next 24 to 48 hours will be very interesting to see if Israel is going to do something. Because if it waits beyond the 48-hour window, then it would also, I think, maybe lose the opportunity to respond in kind to what happened. And a response could come later. It could be a cyber attack. It could be a covert operation of some kind. But it would no longer be within the current engagement that we're finding ourselves in right now.
Yeah. I want to put up the front cover, the recent front cover of The Economist magazine. They recently put this on their cover, Israel Alone. Now, since the Iranian attack, this attack really demonstrated that Israel was very much not alone, didn't it?
No, it did. And you know, it's remarkable. And I think we have to appreciate this moment in time. Despite everything I just said, you know, the fact that we have all these countries from around the world, whether it's the United States and the British and the French, and we were talking about Paraguay and Chile and Argentina, everyone around the world, and the whole G7 gathering earlier this evening with President Biden to unequivocally condemn the Iranian aggression and to say that we stand by Israel's right to act in self-defense. But I think, as we saw, Michael, and you at Stand With Us, you guys, this is what you do, right? It's about defending Israel and standing up for Israel around the world, and making sure that the message and the truth gets out there. But I think we both know that the world likes us when we're under attack, and they like us when we are unfortunately injured or even killed. They don't like when we stand up and fight back. And we saw how quickly that changed after October 7th, when we started to defend ourselves. Yeah. And without getting into too much detail, in a way that books will be written about the way the military, the IDF, has been fighting inside the Gaza Strip in what is probably the most complicated urban terrain ever and battlefield, but with the greatest sensitivity to the civilian population inside Gaza. And the numbers of casualties speak for themselves, but the world doesn't stand up and appreciate that. And I'm afraid that the support we have now will only last as long as we are attacked. The moment we decide to defend ourselves is the moment that all these countries that you're now seeing on the screen are going to, unfortunately, walk away from us.
So important that we continue to bolster that support. And of course, we also had the scene of Israel defending the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount. Let's take a look at that. And I warn our Israeli viewers, you'll hear the sound of red alert sirens. So you have the Iranian regime, which has made so much of Jerusalem as an issue in which to attack Israel over decades, really, attacking one of the holiest sites in Islam and certainly the holiest site in Judaism. How will the region look at this moment and this attack in general?
I mean, this is the opportunity that we currently find ourselves in, right? What we see is really a remarkable moment in time where not only does the whole Western world recognize the violent regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran and what it's really about, which is to try to kill as many people in Israel and to try to really undermine, weaken, and even destroy Israel, because that's what they say they want to do. But they have total disregard for what we would have said maybe their own people, right? Muslims and the holy sites of the Islam religion. This is a regime that will stop at nothing to try to achieve its objective of further deteriorating this region. And I think that the Saudis get this. The Egyptians get this. And again, I'll borrow what we've been seeing over the last 6 months with Israel's offensive against Hamas in Gaza. When you look around the world and you look at the countries where those condemnations are coming from, they're mostly coming from North America. They're mostly coming from the United Kingdom. They're mostly coming from Europe. You don't hear the government of Morocco and the Emiratis and the Saudis and the Egyptians getting up every day and condemning the state of Israel and its war against Hamas, because they understand what it is we're fighting for and what we're fighting against. And I think this is also what they now realize about Iran as well. They want us to defeat these enemies. They want to stand with us. And we saw that beautiful illustration of this regional cooperation that exists and has even greater potential to come with the way the Jordanian Air Force fought to intercept many of these drones as they were flying through its airspace on its way to Israel.
And of course, there is a bigger threat looming. What do we know about Iran's nuclear capability at this time?
Well, look, we know that Iran for decades now has been pursuing a nuclear capability. We know, based on IAEA reports, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, that over the last 6 months, under the cover, I would say, of the war in Gaza, they have used this as an opportunity to continue to enrich uranium to higher degrees and higher levels. You need, for a military grade uranium, what would be HEU, highly enriched uranium, you would need 90% enriched. They have now a very significant quantity of uranium that's enriched already to 60% and up, which means within just a matter of maybe a week or two, if not less, they could enrich that uranium to the 90% level, that would give them what's known as an SQ, a significant quantity for a nuclear device. They still don't have the weapon, as far as the Israeli intelligence and other Western intelligence agencies talk about, not that capability of installing a warhead on one of those ballistic missiles that they launched towards Israel earlier this morning. But they've been proceeding and plowing forward with their nuclear program, with everything going on between Israel and Gaza and everything going on in the world. And it's a moment to recognize, I think, Michael, that all of the diplomacy that we've seen over the years, whether it was the 2015 JCPOA, the nuclear deal that President Obama pushed through, whether it was the re-engagement by President Biden when he returned, when he was elected, whether it was even Donald Trump, who pulled out of the JCPOA, but wasn't successful in filling that vacuum with another deal, a better deal, which he thought he would be able to push through. Sanctions and the diplomacy that the West has been putting on the Iranians has yet to deliver what I think we all want, which is an end to their nuclear program, an end to their violence and their support of terrorist proxies throughout the region. And just one last thing, by the way, and I think we saw this early this morning at about 2 a.m., one of the big flaws that Israel has for years spoken about when it comes to the 2015 JCPOA was that it did nothing to their development of ballistic missiles. And we saw what those ballistic missiles can do. They can fly towards Israel. And if they had not been intercepted by our amazing Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 ballistic missile defense systems, they would have killed people here in Israel. So there are many flaws with the approach until now, with the way the West has been granting Iran immunity for too many years and way too long.
And finally, you mentioned our daughters are serving together in the IDF as we speak. We very much wish success to the men and women of the IDF, but it's a very changed army now post October the 7th. What does the future hold for Israel Defense Forces?
Look, the Israeli military has really, despite the failures that led to October 7th and the failures that we saw on October 7th, the failure to learn and to gather that intelligence ahead of time and the warning of what Hamas was planning to do, the failure of the barriers and the defensive measures that we had put in place along the Gaza border to stop an infiltration and an attack of this kind, and the failure of the IDF to stop them once they had crossed in. These are all things that will have to be fixed, investigated, and I will assume that heads will eventually roll at that top level of the general staff. But when I look on the ground and I look at the soldiers themselves and I look at the way that the IDF has been fighting in Gaza, first of all, just one word about the interoperability, the way that the ground forces and the Air Force and the Navy and everyone has been working together really in an unprecedented way that militaries around the world are already coming here to learn and to study. The way that they've adapted and improvised, which is for a long time, have been two of the strongest traits of the Israeli military and its ability to adapt to new threats and to the change in the region and to the threats that we face along our borders. But also, I have to say one word about the courage and the bravery of our soldiers. I've long thought since October 7th, and I assume you'll agree with me that, when I think to the Tanakh, to the Old Testament, I think of the book of Judges, which is the book that really tells the stories of amazing heroes of the Jewish people in ancient time, there's the need for a new book of Judges. There's a need for a new book of the heroes of October 7th and the heroes that we've seen in the last 6 months, of people, young folks, men and women, willing to put their lives on the line to keep our country safe, is something that every day moves me anew.
Absolutely. We are lucky to have them doing incredible work, and we've seen it up and down the country. Yaakov Katz, thank you so much for your analysis and for your time today. We appreciate it very much.